Hey, everybody. In today's marketplace full of uncertainty, there's huge opportunity in used cars for both groups, large and small. Finding an advantage in used as a used car manager or director is the difference between winning and not. Today's show will share how one large group in the Midwest identified one such area, and in so doing, not only increased their margin, reduced turn time, but saved over $500,000 in expense. Not to mention decreasing the headaches associated with vehicle transport. Joining us today, Tom Baer, Stephan Morris, both of Dahmer Auto Group, and VP Sales Auto Hauler Exchange, Frank Zombo. Let's get into today's show. All right, so Tom, how long have you been a used car director? How long have you been buying and selling used cars?
I've been buying and selling used cars. I really started doing that full time for the company in 2017 and joined the company in 2002, started off as a new car salesman, but ended up going through that. And this has kind of been my role since 2017.
And what about you, Stephan?
I grew up in the business. My dad's been an independent dealer since 1978. So, by the time I was born, he was 4 years in, and joined Dahmer as an employee about 4 years ago. But I worked at Odessa, Kansas City Auto Auction before that. And Tom and I built a great relationship. They were my number one customer. And some changes happened during COVID, and I had a great opportunity to come to work for Dahmer, and just love every day of it.
Well, we're living in an interesting time. So Dahmer Auto Group, you in Missouri, 8 locations, you sell about 1,000 vehicles a month. The past few days, by the time this drops, we'll be even further down in. What do you make of the used car industry right now in the marketplace? I mean, it is in a time of change.
Yeah, I started seeing indicators of that probably starting 2 or 3 weeks ago, just in the increase of the number of bids that, we're seeing on the acquisition side on vehicles, and then vehicles that we're remarketing as well. And, as a group, we had a record month last month. We delivered, I think, almost 1,600 new and used combined, and it was going to end up being our largest used car volume month. So we were able to get a lot of vehicles purchased last month, which we feel like was good based on everything else that we're seeing now. And then it's just kind of, seeing something new released every hour on, what different things are going on in the market with the tariffs, obviously.
So both of you have an immense amount of experience. You're at a great auto group. What advice do you have to a used car manager or director in a group that's trying to win right now? Like, there's always opportunity in a little bit of chaos and adversity. Where's the opportunity right now?
I think there's opportunity everywhere right now.
Yeah.
Not to speak in, cliches, but, I feel like every challenge presents an opportunity. We were all terrified in 2020. Nobody knew what was going to happen. And, lo and behold, we ended up in the greatest time in the car business in history.
Yeah.
I think we look at it like that.
Yeah, to add to that, I'd say probably number one, starts your acquisition with your trade-in. So I doubt that everybody's look to book is where everybody wants it to be. So this is a great time to relook at that process and say, hey, how are we actually appraising trades? Are we putting the right money in them? Are we, do we know who the best end user is for each vehicle? And if we can identify that, we should be able to make more trade deals. And then, so that's one pipeline. The second one would be, your service drive. Or your current lease portfolio. So part of the thing that we're seeing is there is a lack of availability of off-lease vehicles, which everybody kind of knew that was the case just based on the numbers over the last several years. So when you get the opportunity that comes back into your dealership, there's probably a good chance you want to buy it. And even if it isn't right for the group, you'll probably be able to remarket it and make some money at the auction right now on those types of vehicles.
So as you sit in the lane or as you sit on the computer and you're looking at purchasing vehicles, in the past couple of weeks, and given your experience, have you seen anything that surprised you with regards to valuations or who's bidding on what or what people's strategies are in the lane?
Yeah, anecdotally, during COVID, the one thing you would see is the auctioneer would open up the price, the opening bid for a vehicle. And normally in a normal market, he's got to come down, a couple of $1,000s before people hook in and start bidding. And like this last week, personally, like specifically on trucks, that we were remarketing, it would open the bid and then just go up from there. And anecdotally, seeing Carvana, which owns the auction, Odessa now, they were extremely busy. And when you see a big buyer like that getting really aggressive and buying a large volume of vehicles, I think it's a great indicator to say, hey, there's something going on here, because they aren't doing it to just have fun. They have a plan.
So I've seen that online. You see Carvana aggressively out there trying to buy everything they possibly can, everything, notwithstanding some of the uncertainty in the market. What do you think their play is?
I think their play is that they have a system now where they've gotten the 56 physical locations of ADESA in place, where they're able to recondition and then distribute those vehicles throughout their channels. And they're up big time year over year in retail sales. They're profitable. So yeah, I mean, my answer is they feel like they have a machine that's going to be able to work through those cars, and then they're going to be able to retail them. So, it's one thing in a market where we're going to be affected by tariffs in one way or the other. One of the things that we thought of as a group prior to COVID ever happening was, how do we be profitable as a group without a new car department? Because manufacturers control that. We don't ultimately control that. We control how we perform when we get the inventory, but how do we perform as a used car department and service together to cover all the expenses plus be at 30% net to gross, so we can operate independently of that. And so that's kind of like that same thinking now, I guess. And specifically with Carvana, apparently they don't have new car franchises, so they kind of did this on steroids really big.
Yeah.
So it's kind of exciting.
Does their approach make other used car directors, managers in acquisition? I mean, it forces us all to pay a little bit more, doesn't it? Like the competition.
Yeah, yes. And I think if you watch what they're doing, they're going after vehicles that are, 3 years old, that have, decent miles per year, 12 to 15,000 miles per year. So they know that those vehicles are going to be the least amount available online, kind of going back to that lease conversation we had with lease pipeline shrinking down. And so they want to have a big presence in that price band, or in that market of vehicles, because that's where there's the least probably amount of competition.
So you mentioned one of the advantages they have. They've got a big advantage of, obviously, their nationwide network. They're online. They can go start to finish in some form, fashion or another. They've got some significant struggles, but they're able to ship vehicles. They're able to acquire all over the country. They're able to ship all over the country. What does that look like for you? Are you trying to acquire things you just bought a car from us in Schaumburg, at our Chrysler store in Schaumburg Chrysler, had it shipped to where you are. How are you thinking about shipping, both delivering to customers and then also picking up out there?
Well, we have a great partner, Auto Exchange, that helps us with that. One of the toughest markets to buy in is the market that we currently are in, which is Kansas City. It's very aggressive. We buy out of California, Florida, Texas. We literally will go buy something anywhere if it makes sense, and if we can buy enough of them to where the concept of economies of scale come into play, and you can get a truckload or 2 or 3 or 4, and then move them where it makes sense and bring them into our market. So we're going all over the place.
You'll go all. So Frank, Auto Hauler Exchange, what are you seeing in the marketplace in kind of this moment of uncertainty over these past few weeks? Are you seeing an increase in the number of shipments that you're making? Are you seeing the increase in the number of deliveries?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's funny. It was when it's going to be used stuff for us. Is a lot of our dealers are buying from auctions all over the country. So we see when consumers are buying, and these dealers need to replace their inventory with auction purchases. So, February was a little slow, but obviously this past March, even like Tom said, he saw something change over the last 3 weeks. And it was the biggest month we've ever had from a transportation side of things. And like I said, our dealers that that are always buying stuff, bought more. And the dealers that maybe cooled off a little bit came back. So it seemed like everybody was taking place in using these auctions as ways to acquire used inventory for sure.
So here's the question playing into that is, what is the trend line? And actually, this is a question for everybody. So when you think about the trend line, March was a big month. We're seeing used car prices going up. There's additional competition in the marketplace. What do you see as you Auto Hauler Exchange just shipped the most vehicles you've ever shipped? Does that trend continue into April, or do we see a little bit of a cooling off, Frank?
Again, every month is slightly different. It seems like dealers will go into month end, and then you're like, all right, in my job as the VP of sales is to beat the previous month. And so April, we're only 4 days in, is already on track to be about the same, or if not a little bit better than it was last month. So again, I don't know how folks are going to react to these tariffs, but it seems like people are definitely focusing on the used car market. And like what Tom said is, you're kind of regulated on what the OEM is going to set prices at for the new stuff, whereas the used is it's really up to you to make that money off of that. So we are seeing that on our end, and folks are really focusing on the used car acquisition side of things.
Yeah, Tom, what's your take? And then Stephan.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to have slowed down at all. And I was just pulling up our our retail numbers, and obviously we're on day 4 of the month, but we're pacing a bigger month in volume in used cars than we did last month. So we'll just keep it up.
A record after a record.
That's our plan. I mean, we set a record for number of units purchased last month between Tom and I, and our goal is to break that this month.
Yeah.
So when you think about some of the volatility, are there vehicles you're staying away from? You mentioned what Carvana is looking at. What are there vehicles that you're like, hey, it's not worth the risk right now?
Yeah, like a Cybertruck. I mean, yeah. So
you look at the resale on any EV right now; it's way down, right?
Yeah.
At least turn-ins are way down. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. So that's probably some. Obviously, we wouldn't go out and acquire, something in that bucket. We try to do a good job of sticking with our core brands and our core inventory that we sell a lot of volume of. So that's one piece of it, and then branch out from there. So I think the other part too is that right now is a great time to get rid of some inventory if it is totally like the wrong thing or a high miles or just something's kind of off with it that doesn't work retail wise for your group. Get it on an auction site and get off of it now. Because we're not guaranteed it's going to keep going up.
So some groups would jettison their day turn. You're saying keep the day turn.
Yeah. One of the things we have to look at is we're kind of in the finance business more than the car business because we have to be able to get these deals financed. So how are the banks going to respond and buy? Interest rates are still fairly high. Affordability is the question. And when values were going up last time, affordability wasn't really an issue because there was trillions of dollars of cash floating around, and there was the interest rates were basically zero, at least from the Fed. So that's something that's a concern. So I would always keep that in the back of your head that's what's different about this time. So stay nimble, and I think turning off your turn is not a good thing.
Yes. So Tom, transitioning from kind of market economics to shipping vehicles from point A to point B, and what Auto Hauler Exchange has done for you in terms of making you flexible, better, more nimble. What did your world look like prior to Auto Hauler Exchange? Like you were on the board probably, right? And you were out just trying to put shipments up for bid. How has Auto Hauler Exchange changed your world from that perspective?
Well, the service we used before was cars arrived, which was great. They were nice. The issue where Auto Hauler offered us a big value add and better performance was, for instance, I'd buy a lot of vehicles out of Odessa Golden Gate in California, and it would take a long time to get those vehicles transported because of the way the other dispatcher was bidding those out to other transporters. And Frank can probably explain it better than I can, but they were able to get our cars here much faster at a great rate by the techniques that they have built into their platform and their business plan.
Tell us, what is the benefit of speed to shipping in the used car game in our current market?
Yeah, I mean, these cars generally it costs you money every day to own these things, so you can't retail them if they're still sitting at the at the auction or they're on a truck. So you buy $1 million worth of cars in an afternoon at Odessa Golden Gate, and it takes 2 weeks to get them there. You have $1 million in cash outlaid that's doing absolutely nothing. So it's a financial strain on the dealership. The cars are aging. Things can happen to them, come in with damage, et cetera, and you basically have frozen capital. So from a business perspective, it's a bad, it's not good.
And right now, buying it and selling it quickly, buying it, acquiring it, reconning it, getting it online has got to be super important, right? You mentioned sticking to a tight turn discipline.
If you go through, and this is like an old exercise I learned from Tommy Gibbs. He was a great, used car mind that everybody's probably heard of. But if you look at your grosses on your retail deals that you sold in the first 30 days of actually owning the car, and then compare it to everything that was sold 31 days and older, it's going to be a substantial, it'll just blow your mind when you do that. So that's another reason, hey, everything I can sell into this first 30-day bucket, I got to make it happen regardless if I'm trading for it or if I'm buying it, off one of the coasts.
Yeah.
Got to get it and move it.
Interest rates, all these factors impact it.
Yeah.
Stephan, anything else we're missing thinking about the cost of long ship times?
The first thing that comes to my mind is, if you buy a truckload of vehicles and say 2 or 3 of them have issues that would be eligible for arbitration, but it takes you 2 weeks to get your car, you're out. There's no recourse. And previously that
happened all the time.
We used to have, truckloads of cars that were, 14 days, 16 days, 18 days old that would show up and not be as described.
Yeah.
And,
Stephan, in the 18 months that we've worked with you, how many times has that happened?
Probably zero.
I don't think we've ever had an arbitrated that it was gone that missed an arbitration window. And the reason we're able to do that, Sam, is instead of giving it to a broker and allowing him to just go post it on some load board, we've built a technology where we give, instead of having just paying a broker an unknown rip, we've given Stephan the ability really to post this opportunity direct to a carrier with all the same benefits of a broker. We pay the carriers, vet the carriers, track the carriers, providing the exact same benefits, but we don't want to give you a quote. We want to tell you, this is the market rate. This is what a carrier needs right now to become profitable in this space, to move that vehicle from California to Kansas City. We don't want to give carriers less money than what it takes to actually fire up their truck and get it to Kansas City, because pretty soon we're not going to have any carriers left. We got to make sure that they're paid. But instead of sharing all that money with a broker for some unknown rip, let's give them what they need, give a transparent fee, and let's get you your vehicles quick. No haggling with carriers, try to break them down for the lowest dollar.
So part of how you're able to decrease the ship time is better transparency and then incentivizing the drivers such that they're ready to go, right? It's not sitting around waiting for it to finish up. Am I hearing that right?
Well, everyone knows kind of what a market rate, what it takes to get a vehicle from California to Kansas City. But if I'm a broker trying to make a rip and I've already quoted you at a certain price, I'm going to haggle with that carrier over $25, $50. Because over time, and you're moving 100 vehicles for Cable Dahmer out of that area a month, you're going to make some money off of those little rips. But then that carrier now is like, I'll go find something else, or I'm going to maybe wait on it for 6 days or 3 days and try to make that $25 because over time. But it's like with our approach and Stephan pricing them, he just is going to price it right now at the market rate. And there you go. And that's what that carrier needs. So he's going to pick it up same day. There's no haggling for 3 days trying to make an extra $25, $50.
Yeah. So in the old world, how much would you spend on arbitration, Stephan? Lost arbitration. Like what would that cost you in the old world prior to,
I don't know that I could put an actual dollar figure on it, but it would be substantial.
Yeah.
To go back to what, if I can backtrack a little bit to what Frank was saying, the transparency of their system, of Auto Hauler Exchange's system, has been one of the greatest assets to getting these cars moved faster. I've started to develop relationships with these actual transporters. I just had one text me today on my personal cell phone and say, hey, if you can do another $100 on this, load out of Orlando, I can get it picked up this afternoon. So, pop right on, and then I get a notification that it's picked up. That's been one of the greatest parts about it. I'm not having to call an 800 number and then maybe get a person who's familiar with our account, maybe not. If I've got an issue with a car, I've got somebody that needs a gate release, or, if there's trouble with a vehicle at pickup, they reach right out to me, or I can reach right out to them, and, we can get problems handled in an instant instead of, having to go through a third party to handle all that stuff for us. And maybe it's a little extra work, but to me, the time that we save or the cycle time that we save on top of the cost savings, we're not paying a broker 20, 25, 30% to do something that we can do ourselves.
Yeah. And the reason that carrier did ask for that $100 right now is because the market rate has changed in the state of Florida. Right now it's snowbird season. So a lot of vehicles are leaving Florida. So that carrier is asking for a new market rate. Whereas if I was a broker and I quoted that, I would say, oh, no, I'm not going to lose money on this shipment. I'm going to let it sit. And it might sit for 14 days. It might sit for 21 days because that broker is not going to lose money on this. But with this business model and Stephan being like, all right, well, I realize the state of Florida, and we'll give you alerts like, listen, the state of Florida is the market's changing there. All of a sudden, Nashville, a big OEM is releasing a big, shipment of vehicles. So it gets the demand changes in different markets based on simply the demand of vehicles available for carriers to ship. And right now we're experiencing that in Florida. So that's why that carrier reached out. Was like, hey, I can do this today, but I'm going to need an extra $100 because that's what the new market rate is, because that's why the demand is, increased in that area.
That's pretty cool. And again, with the shifting market, with the cost of interest rates, cost of flooring, that speed to ship has got to be crucial. Is there like a metric in your world, Frank, where you talk about average days to ship Auto Hauler Exchange versus other competitors?
Yeah. So again, Cable Dahmer does a large amount they move a lot of vehicles. And again, long distances, California to Kansas, New York, Maine, Florida, South Florida to Kansas. Our average from time that's posted to dropped off is 4 days. That one, I'm staring at that one that we just talked about because it's funny. Stephan bought a vehicle from Ziegler Automotive in Illinois. That one was posted on a Friday afternoon because that's usually when Stephan uploads his stuff from his Friday auctions, and then it delivered on Tuesday morning. So I mean, over the weekend, still 4 days, and those are 2 of those days aren't business days, but getting picked up in a transparent manner with pickup drop off photos, and in case there is an arbitration, we have everything there to solve that issue.
Well, if you make more money on that than we would have, we're going to be mad. So we'll cut this episode. But you can't retail our cars better than we would retail our cars. Because it would be cable Dahmer competition. Bring that ultimate automotive.
Well, we'd be happy to sell you something back.
Yeah, that's funny. So, Frank, what made you guys think to put together this new exchange? We had the president of the company on the podcast a couple months ago, and he talked about kind of the evolution of it. But what made you see the need for this and decide this is something that you wanted to fill? So,
for me, 2 years ago, I knew nothing about vehicle logistics or the automotive space. I came from a football background. I played football in Green Bay and then in Kansas City. And I met Royce at, one of golfing, and he's like, hey, I have this new idea for a company that is going to put my current business out of business. And I was intrigued by that. Because
he was a broker. He's a broker.
He was a broker, exactly. He's like, I don't see a need for it. He does a lot of freight, produce, things like that. But he's like, I don't see a need for it in the automobile space. Let's build a marketplace and let the shipper connect directly to a carrier. And so I was the second employee back 2.5 years ago. And now we're up to about 35 employees. And just to watch it grow, we just got our Series A funding. So now we're really blowing this thing out with more engineers and making the technology better. We just had a new release probably a month ago. And just the efficiencies of it and the way I never want to sell something, because these relationships I've had with Stephan and Tom, my name's attached to this thing. And some of my dealers in Chicago and in Wisconsin, Green Bay, it came from football. Regardless, my name is on this thing. To watch people say like how much enjoying it, saving money. I like that it's transparent. I never feel like I'm taking advantage of my customer. I never am getting a rip or like I'm never making some unknown amount. Like, hey, I'm going to quote you at this, but I got it for this. Like, you're seeing exactly what Auto Hauler is making on every transaction. And based on our business model, it's not always in our best interest to move it at a more expensive price. I want to move it at an expensive price because I want to get it to your lot quicker. But based on our model, it's not like I'm making that money. The carrier is getting that money to move it in a speedy fashion to get to your dealership, to get to your recon facility, so you can sell that vehicle and move it. So that's what I like about what I do. It's transparent. There's no way I'm getting one off on you. And we're here to help, and it's working, and it's fun every day to come to work. It really is. Not for nothing, too. You mentioned being one of the first employees. Usually, as oftentimes as companies scale, we see it in the vendor world, they actually become worse, right? Because they have a difficult time understanding how to continue to deliver the service. You've kept up with this increased demand, and is it the technology? Is it the people? Is it the approach? What's enabled you to grow? And not only continue to uphold the promise, but even become better as you grow and scale. Yeah, it's funny you say that. I mean, coming from a locker room atmosphere my whole life, right? Playing in Green Bay, Kansas City, and I've always dealt with winning. My worst season ever in the NFL was 9-7, and it wasn't because in the NFL all talent is about the same, but the difference is like the culture in your locker room. And it also helps having Patrick Mahomes and Aaron Rodgers as well. But that culture that they base it on, and I feel like, I've tried to take that same approach as the second employee, as the VP of sales, recruiting folks to join Auto Hauler Exchange. But the technology obviously is helping, is doing a great thing. We have an operations team to make sure so Stephan doesn't have to reach out to every single carrier. We have an operations team that are monitoring ETAs, making sure standards are being met, and then the technology is taking care of a lot of it. So we don't have to charge as much because we don't have a physical touch on every single one of these moves. Yes, it's vehicle logistics. Problems are going to come up, and we have a team here to help with those issues. But I mean, it's 5% of the time, 10%. It's not a large percent of the time. So we don't need to be making these large rips, to keep our lights on, because the tech is really solving for a lot of these issues. That's very cool.
One of the amazing things about AHX, so we buy a lot of vehicles out of Michigan, and we have the same hauler when I use the other service, deliver those vehicles for us. And again, it would take like 14 to 16 days. We still have the same hauler moving most of those vehicles at obviously, 4 and 5 days. but we're doing it through the AHX platform. And what Frank described, everything that it offers is exactly why we're not having to wait, 2 weeks to get these big loads of vehicles out of Detroit and these other big hubs where there's big GM, factory hubs up there, where we do buy a lot of vehicles out of there. So it makes a big, big difference.
Yeah, we would have vehicles up there, like Tom said, that would sit for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And finally, I asked the carrier what they were getting paid to move these vehicles. And the difference between what they were getting paid and what we were paying, I about fell out of my chair. They weren't making 15 or 20 bucks on us. I mean, they were, it was a car deal. Yeah, your salesman would have gotten a mini off these deals.
Yeah. Well, stay out of Michigan, for crying out loud. Stay out of Michigan. All we want, we just need Michigan, Illinois, Indiana. No, I'm just kidding with you. So,
Tom and Stephan, on average, what were you think you're saving from your past, whoever you used in the past compared to now?
I mean, I would say 25% or so. Wouldn't you say, Tom?
Yes.
25% less to ship this way versus prior.
Yeah.
And not just in and they speed a lot. That's not even calculated that in too for interest and everything.
And or is it do arbitration?
The amount that I post the vehicles for is on average about 25% less than previous. And the speed that they show up to the lot, I mean, I get calls from a recon team like, "Hey man, is there any way you can slow these things down? Like, you just bought this load 3 days ago, and I've got 18 cars sitting here, and we're buried."
Hey, you just mentioned
it's a great problem to have.
You just broke a record in vehicles shipped.
We broke a record for vehicles purchased in a month.
Yeah. Which this is not going to end. So the challenge of shipping vehicles and the solution of doing it economically and quickly is going to be hugely important. So, Stephan, as we finish up here, what advice would you give to dealerships struggling with sourcing and transporting used cars in this marketplace we're in right now?
Well, I mean, as far as transportation, I don't know that there's anyone else you should talk to other than Auto Hauler. I mean, if you want your cars moved quickly, not to sound like a sales pitch, but I truly believe in their company. They've done immense things to help us better our business. I definitely couldn't recommend them highly enough. And as far as acquisition strategy, know your market, know the rules of the auction. Just stay disciplined. Don't go nuts because everybody else is going nuts. I'm not sure that I have a great answer for that. Tom will have a much better one than I will.
Tom, what you got? And then I want to add one thing.
Well, if you're not good at anything, you can be great at getting your cars moved by signing up with Auto Hauler Exchange.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's easy. Everybody can do that because we're all going to have to move cars, right?
Yeah.
I was just thinking, is there going to be a time when you're going to have to do a dealer trade on a new car because you had to give something up to get a price protected car that's not hit with a tariff that's sitting on Ziegler's lot up in Chicago, and somehow we have to get it or whatever. So you'll have to use it on that too. But again, have a process. Even though your process may not be the best process, you should have a process and stick to it and work it and stick with the basics, and that's about it.
I'll tell you, it's been fun talking to you both. Cable Dahmer's an enormously respected dealer group where you are. You obviously are driving success and winning in the used car department. And it strikes me as we have this conversation that every little advantage every used car manager anywhere across the country can gain is going to give them the upper hand in our current marketplace. So again, speeding time to ship, reducing time on ground and on flooring is going to make any dealer more competitive in the marketplace. And so Auto Hauler Exchange solutions like that are going to give everybody a leg up. And I would imagine as a used car manager in today's marketplace, you want to try to find one or two or three of those little advantages. You pile them up together and you win in the marketplace, right?
Yes.
Stephan, that's how you win, right?
Exactly.
And Frank, as we close out, just one last thing. It's interesting. Most dealer principals, and I'm the COO here at this auto group, you don't think about the cost of shipping. You don't think about the cost of losing your arbitration time. You don't think about the cost. You think about the cost of flooring because it's an enormous line item right now, but the time that shipping takes. What's your biggest struggle? What's one thing you wish dealers knew when you go in and you're like, hey, Cable Dahmer, They decrease their time to ship. They decrease their shipping by 25%. What's one thing you wish every executive knew when they're trying to make the decision about who to contract with for shipping?
Yeah, it's easy. I've talked to some large dealership groups that they don't know how much they're spending in transportation a year. Like, we can provide you that. And then when you talk about a 20% savings over a whole year, that's a large amount of money that could possibly be saved and not going into some broker's pocket to make some secret rip. That would be the biggest thing I'd say to executives when you're trying to look at those types of things. Shipping is a large cost at a dealer, one of the major costs of a dealership group. And we're able to show you that and save you on that.
All right. Well, hey, Stephan, Tom, Frank, thank you for being on today. Hopefully everybody walked away with some valuable insight information that gives you, as a used car manager, used car director in a large group, small group, or single point, a little bit of an advantage in the marketplace. Appreciate you guys sharing the best practice that you've shared with us today in shipping your vehicles. Thank you both for being on.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Stephan, Tom, thanks.